at the Standard Group, you're also having a moment of silence, just a period of a silence in contemplation, prayer, and reflection and meditation of the leadership of the late President Daniel Arap Moi. So let's cross over to the Standard Group ground and just listen in live.
Our lives to live better. And therefore, for the former president, he must have pleased God to have lived for 95 years. 25 years beyond what is the yardstick of a normal human being. So as we celebrate his life, we thank God for those 95 years. But I challenge you who are living that you make a mark for yourselves and that you may be remembered for the good things you have done to humankind. God bless you. Asante sana.
Asante sana Beno Molo, na sijui wangapi waliweza kuwa wakijua wakati Moi alikuwa president. Kama sisi tulikuwa vijana wadogo tukikunywa hiyo maziwa, ile kitu nilikuwa nakumbuka tukienda mkutano kama hii, ile kitu lazima alikuwa anasema ili ajue kama kila mtu anafuata nyayo, alikuwa anawaambia inua kidole. Hebu muinua kidole tuone. Kama unakubaliana na mimi inua kidole, alafu anasema tingisha. Tingisha. Kama bwana tingisha, utajua utakuwa na kazi mingi. So hiyo ndio nakumbuka sana, na najua kila mtu alikuwa anatingisha. So ningependa kukaribisha mkurugenzi mkuu Bwana Orlando aje atuongeleshe. Asante.
Asante Bwana Nicholas. Ningependa kwa salimu nyote, salamu za mwaka mpya watu.
All right, that is the Standard Group CEO Orlando Lyomu right there addressing members of the staff of the Standard Group Media, different products, staff from different products of the Standard Group Media, just coming together for a moment of silence. Let's just cross over back there and listen live.
What was on the minds of some people, I said, okay, instead of doing it, I think the idea was to try and do it yesterday evening. And my feeling was that the short notice, maybe a lot of you would have gone for your assignments. And we said, why don't we do it in the morning, first things? Then people can go about their business. So thank you for honoring this invite. We are here to celebrate the life of the former president, Daniel Arap Moi. A lot of you probably know it, some of you don't know it, but this is a statesman who did a lot for the country, but more specifically for this institution, there's a certain connection that is special. I know a lot of things will be said, a lot of people will have different memories. What I know is that today, probably the people who would relate with those days, because those are the people who probably went to school during that period. A lot of the faces I see in front of me are the young ones, the millennials. I think most of the guys I see today are probably between 25 and 35. They could have been probably too young to have enjoyed Maziwa ya Nyayo. You could have been probably too young to understand. Some of you look at that period as history. You have to go to the library to research. But I'm sure for those who remember it as current affairs, I would place them in the around 40s and upwards. But really, we are just here to say, when somebody has touched so many lives, when somebody has been blessed with such a long life, when their impact has gone beyond the borders, then you don't mourn their passing, but to celebrate their life and their achievements. I think that's what we'll do here today. You'll agree with me that probably Benedict should be doing strategy in one of the mainstream churches. We are lucky to have him as part of our EXCO team because as brief as his sermonette was, for a moment I couldn't help but think You know, he could probably carry through a 20-minute sermon with very great ease, and the congregation would actually think he's been to a school of theology, probably the doctorate. Benedict, thank you very much. It's good to know that we have people in our ranks, in our teams, who we can call upon at very short notice when we have such events or such occasions. So I don't want to say much. I have a prepared speech. This is the one time I'll try and stay according to script, because if I go off script, there's a lot I can say. So the board, management, and staff of the Standard Group PLC convey their heartfelt condolences to the family, relatives, and friends of Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, the second President of the Republic of Kenya. We stand with Kenyans as we honor his legacy and mourn his loss. The former president led Kenya in peace and stability, and will be remembered as an African statesman who deepened East Africa relations and led efforts to bring peace and reconciliation on the African continent. Driven by his Nyayo motto, which was anchored on his leadership philosophy of peace, love, and unity. Some of his key achievements for the country include the introduction and execution of the 844 education system. President Moi introduced the 844 system, which emphasized practical and vocational training. These formed the basis for universities' expansion to address educational needs of the rapidly growing population. He will also be remembered for the free school milk program that endeared him to the children, their parents, and teachers. These helped raise primary school enrollment by about 23% in 1979. Now, this is where, again, I said the millennials might not understand this. Probably you went to schools that offered you milk in cups. For some of us, we went to school when you had to walk a few kilometers. If you are a day scholar and if you're in boarding, it was different. But the only milk you really got was that milk in a packet that came on a truck. And I remember it was very clear, there were specific days of the week. And depending on which school you went to, the milk would be dished out at a particular time. And there was nothing as a long day on the day the milk was being served, because you couldn't wait for classes to end and for the truck to arrive and for you to get your one packet of milk, and if you are cunning enough, to go back to the queue and get your second one. The former head of state was passionate about environmental conservation. His devotion to soil conservation made him gather the cabinet in the year 1989 and physically engage them in building of gabions under the scorching sun. This was popularly known as Momonyoko wa Udongo. He will be remembered and respected for the peaceful power transition in 2003 after ruling the country for 24 years, something that was rare among African heads of states at the time. His legacy was centered around youth and women empowerment programs, expansion of health, and general infrastructure development. May the Almighty God rest his soul in eternal peace. And at this juncture, I would like to invite you to observe a moment of silence. And I'll make it a minute, so we'll start now. say as I hand over back to Siwatum is that when Benedict spoke, he quantified the time that the Bible allocates us in number of days. We normally look at it in terms of years. And he said, your 70 years, it's probably just slightly over 20,000 days. My parting shot is, for the time you'll be given here on earth, what will be your legacy? A lot of times, we are very good at criticizing their leadership was either good or bad. And this is not just political, even in corporate space. You know, you find people who spend their time just bringing the rest down, bringing the energy down, while you find others who do the opposite, which is take people up. When it's your time and people are talking about you and the dashes have been fully covered on either left or right side with your date of birth and your date of departure, as fate will have planned it. Rather than what people will say about you, what will history say about you? What will you have done? A lot of times we forget that small fact and we cruise through every day and we are happy. And I don't think you have to be in a position of responsibility to make a difference in life. Look in your own small ways, whether it is in the village, whether it's in the office, in whatever you do, so that we learn from those who have been there. No one is perfect. No one can be judged to be one-sided. The nature of life is that we all have to be balanced. There's a little of good in everyone and there's a little of bad in everyone. And the two will always compete for that space. Remember, if your life is a perfect circle, then the good and the bad have to fit in that circle. So it's up to you to decide how much of each will reign within that small space. And I think that's the point where I'm saying we should all try and evaluate ourselves and say, at the end of the day, are we doing more of the good or are we letting more of the bad take over? Even as the standard group fraternity, as a team, it will be the same challenges. For me as a leader or as your CEO, it's the same challenges. Every day I wake up, ask myself, how much of good can I achieve and how much of good can I ensure pushes out the bad? Leadership is not about position. Leadership is a state of how you deal with things. Positions are just formal structures that allow us to achieve certain things. So as we go through this period, as we help the country and participate in mourning and celebrating the life of our former president, let's try and learn the lessons that he has left behind. Let's understand the legacy that he tried to build for this nation. And even as the country tries to struggle through this whole space, and you find a lot of people politicking around the issues of BBI, if you grew up and were understanding during the reign of the former president, peace was a very key component of what he preached, of what he wanted, of what he pushed for, not just in Kenya, but in the region. So let's all ensure that this peace starts with us. Remember, when we are talking about a peaceful country, it's not about the state of the institutions. It's about the relationship between individuals. So when we split from here, when we go back to our jobs, remember the peaceful coexistence starts with us. And that's the leadership we can form. If your friends out there want to start making noise, remind them, change starts with us. So thank you very much for coming to this event. Nicholas, thank you, and please do have a good day.
Thank you very much. I'll also just take the opportunity to thank.
That was the CEO of the Standard Group Company Limited, Lando Lyomu, leading the staff of the Standard Group, for a moment of silence, just to reflect on the good times and the leadership of the late former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. And the most important thing he's talked about is the legacy that the former president has left, and what legacy that we also need to leave that day, probably when the Lord shall call us home, because that's a route that everyone has to pass through. And talking about the legacy, that is a discussion also want us to have with the Executive Director of Global Peace Foundation, that is Daniel Juma. Thank you so much, for joining us here on KTN News Center. When you talk about the president, former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, what do you remember him for?
Thank you, Brenda. And first, I want to send my condolences to the family and all the Kenyans who grew up under Baba Moi, as we fondly know him. Most of us who grew up in the Nyayo era remember Moi as a father figure, as someone who loved education, someone who dedicated most of his time, most of his resources to raise money, to build schools, to buy school buses. Moi traversed the country. He was a president who was always traveling, throughout the country in the rural areas, to be able to, to conduct harambes, to be able to build schools. So for me, even though I was very young, when Moi came to power, but I remember during that time, the Nyayo philosophy of peace, love, and unity. So when Moi came to power after the death of the first president, Jomo Kenyatta, he announced that alikuwa anafuata nyayo za Mzee Kenyatta. So in everything that he did, he was saying that everything that he was doing, he is taking, on from where Kenyatta left. And based on that, he was able to actually stabilize the country. Here was a man who was taking over, from the first president, and it is him to announce the death of the president. So, I remember he had to be sworn in, and then announce the death of the first president, and then start arranging for the state funeral of the former president. So we remember Moi as someone who stabilized the country, stabilized the nation after the death of President Kenyatta. And also you have had, and since I am someone who is passionate about peace, people used to say that Kenya is an island of peace in turbulent regional waters. That peace that we know Kenya about is directly attributed to Moi. He ensured, throughout his reign, that the nation was peaceful. And I remember very well, he said that a stable nation, is attractive to development. It's only a stable nation that can bring in investors. When you have peace, you can have all the other things that you need, to move the country forward.
And when you talk about peace, it reminds me of his common statement, siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. You need to have good politics so that you can have, a stable economy. Taking us to a fast commercial break here on a KTN News Center. We shall be right back with Daniel Juma, the Executive Director at the Global Peace Foundation, talking about the legacy of the former President Daniel Toroitich.